And I would jump on there to say that why people should come see it or why they would want to. Because I don't think of it as medicine. I think food is a better analogy because I think that the show, in an artistic sense, is very nutritional. And I'm someone who grew up in a nutritional household. My mother was a very serious health nut. And so, like, I have maybe an appreciation for that kind of food. But think of it as, like, creative food, like an interesting dish, because each piece is so artistically driven. Like, when you think of, like, food as an art. And there's something that really happens when, and I would, state that I'm really into the meta of theater. There's something that really happens when you're doing collage, because you're so specific and particular in the pieces that you're juxtaposing, where you're drawing your sources from. And I think Charles Mee is right that all artists, writers, painters, they draw from, life, but they also draw from other work. And there are some things that slide in subliminally that are taken for granted, that when you're really using collage, you kind of separate yourself from, well, I would say you're articulating that subliminal space because you're choosing the ingredients more particularly that are constructing the world. And so I think people will want to see it. They'll get something that even on a subliminal level will encourage them to take that creative notion that this play plays with and apply it to the work that they're doing, whether that's their day job or in the artwork that they're creating.
I'd like to piggyback on what Stefan was saying about Susan's remark as to the truth in a lot of the dialogue. Because, even in the cast ourselves, we find ourselves in lines from this show in relation to everyday life. There's a truth in the dialogue that I think, while I, too, would not be one to say what people should come see or would want to come see, but if they actually come into that house and sit in that production, which doesn't happen to be a long, long production, you're not grabbing their attention and trying to hold it for far too long. But if they pay attention, there's going to be a ring of truth in some line somewhere that's going to hit a chord inside of them.
I think what you just said there, Henry, kind of reflects back in what Jeff was saying earlier about how exposing yourself to so different many things, you may not know why you should expose yourself to it. You don't know it at the time, but all of a sudden, way down the road, all of a sudden you'll understand the situation so much better because you walked in those shoes for a bit.
And I feel like it's really important to emphasize or to stress that despite that the play itself has very serious themes and the metaphysics are very serious, the play is really a lot of fun. The biggest reaction that I've heard back from people when they've seen the show is that it's just a lot of fun because it is the juxtaposition of serious material presented in a very lighthearted way.
In a lighthearted way, I agree.
At the end of the day, it really is kind of a comedy. Well, it is a comedy in a classical definition.
It's certainly a comedy in every definition.
And it's a lot of fun to play. My hat's off to Stefan. It's a well-balanced cast. It's a real ensemble that Stefan has managed to glue together in a short time.
And I would echo that as well. It's great fun to play with these actors that Stefan has ensembled here, and I enjoy every moment of that. You're having the opportunity to perform and to get to play with these talented people.
If anybody's got anything else to say, going once?
Jeff was talking about how we approach things that are impossible. And I wanted to talk about different modes of impossibility that we aim for in the workshop and in the rehearsal process. There are, of course, things that are perhaps physically impossible, like it would be physically impossible for me to bench press 1,000 pounds. But I would know how I'd go about trying to get closer and closer to 1,000 pounds. Like I'd start with the 30 pounds I can do right now, and maybe next week I could do 35, and 35 is closer to 1,000 than 30 is. There's, of course, another kind of impossibility which has to do with, say, juggling 7 things of different weights blindfolded while riding a unicycle. There are people in the world who can do that, just like there are people who can bench press 1,000 pounds. I may not be one of them, but I don't have the exact same perspective on how I might go about accomplishing that task. I can break that task down into smaller tasks. So rather than juggling 7 different weighted things, maybe I'll start with 3 things that are weighted the same, and maybe I'll start with my eyes open, and maybe I'll start flat on the floor rather than on a unicycle, but then step onto a BAPS board or something. So there's ways that I can go towards enhancing my technical abilities in that regard. And then there's a third thing, of course, which is jumping off a chair in slow motion, which is contrary to the laws of physics. And of course, what's interesting for me, and I hope has been for the cast, is not so much the question of how can we fake people out into thinking we've jumped off a chair in slow motion, which is really the province of wires and chords on $2 million project on Broadway, but how we can spiritually create the frame where that jump happens in slow motion. And when you can do that, that's really where delight crops its way into the performance. And I think, once again, that Charles Mee's brilliance in all this is that he brings it about through juxtaposition. You're going to bring impossibility, or the getting people's guard of their perception down in order to embrace impossibility by placing things that are highly improbable next to one another, and as a result, creating joy.
I maybe have one follow-up to that as well, on the nature of impossibility, because there is this great parallel to, even say traditional theater, with this notion of trying to achieve the impossible, even knowing that it is, say, metaphysically impossible. And it is that most scenes that you see on stage are impossible. Like, they're scripted in a way that the protagonist won't win, and if he does win, he'll only win in the final scene. So in the earlier scenes, the actor's struggle is to try to achieve the impossible, knowing that he will be unable to do that. To me, it's a very interesting parallel in the work that Stefan is doing. That's something that gets me really excited.
All right. You've been listening to Art Watch on Out North Art House Radio. I'm your host, Thomas Higgins, and today we were hearing from Stefan Golix, director of the Cyrano's production of Bob Rauschenberg America, Jeff Aldridge, and Henry Weaver. Bob Rauschenberg America will run Thursday through Sunday until July 15th at Cyrano's. Showtimes are 7 p.m., except for Sundays, which is at 3 p.m. www.cyranos.org. All right, well, thank you all for being here.
And thanks for having us on.
Spaces that I fill my mind with desire, hopeful that will is stronger than fire. The flame is my name for who I'm supposed to be. So justify the blame just for some serenity. 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 I struggle to confine one place at one time. I know just what is mine. Well, I refuse to see the lines. If shame is the game, that it's who I'm supposed to be. Unidentify the claim just for some serenity, serenity, serenity. Serenity, 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 serenity. Serenity, serenity, serenity.
You are tuned into 106.1 KONR, Anchorage, Alaska, Out North Art House Radio.